considering the nature of Israel and how long the Yehudim have a history with the land. And this talks about a 3,500-year relationship. It's actually 4,000 years. The reason that this is referenced to 3,500 years is because Yaakov, this name is so interesting. You know, when you dig in your heel, you not only raise your perspective, you not only stand up straighter, which is how God wants us to be in His presence, but your walk is considerably more straightforward. It's less prone to wavering from side to side. Your stride is so much surer when you do that, and so it depicts someone who isn't swayed to wander from the path that Yahowah has offered, who understands how important it is to be upright in God's presence, and who appreciates why raising your perspective so that you see how everything really plays out and works together, and you are more observant of Yahowah's nature is in our interest. And so do it sometime. You breathe better. Your hands and arms hang down in a more useful way. It is an extraordinarily positive experience to be a Yaakov. Well, anyway, Yahowah renamed Yaakov Yisrael. And Yahowah renamed Yaakov Yisrael after Yaakov was tempted by Hasatan and said that, I want no part of that. I want to embrace the covenant. It's the same thing that Abraham also endured, same thing that the Messiah Yahusha endured. And so Yisrael's place in the land actually goes right back to Yaakov, and so about 3,900 years ago. If you were to discount Abraham, if you include Abraham, which is where the covenant promised the land to Abraham's descendants through Yaakov, through Yishak, and then Yaakov, who became Yisrael or Israel, then it goes back 4,000 years. The children of Israel, it's a fascinating story. We covered the basis of this story on a program last week. I think it might have even been Friday of last week, where they ended up in Egypt because of a drought in Israel. And then while they were there, they were actually enslaved by the Egyptians. The nature of being controlled by what was at the time the most political and religious place on earth. And then after 400 years of being enslaved there, Yahowah brings them back out, and He brings them back into the Promised Land. And if you deal with the timing of that, then you are 3,500 years where Yehudim, Yisrael, is established in the land. And that's this 3,500-year history. Now, what's interesting is that there's not only the Torah's references to, and the Torah prophets and Psalms references to this, where God literally proves that He authored these books, that He exists in the author of the books through prophecy. But as the creator of the universe, He says, I'm giving this land to my people, to Yehudim, to Yisrael. Now, if you're sane, that ought to be enough. But let's just say that you're not sane, that you're too hostile to God to even bother to consider whether or not He proved that He exists and that He authored the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. Yeah, it's just too busy with other things, or just too arrogant to accept that position, to even investigate that position with an open mind. There is evidence from around the world of the house of David, of Yisrael, of Yahowah being the God of the Yehudim. And it's interesting in this regard that there are two steels. Steel is the stone that was etched in antiquity that provides testimony. And the two of the most telling, considering this time, are written in the 8th century BCE, somewhere between 740 and 725. Well, I should stop and say, the prophecy that I'm going to just share with you, that's when it was written, between 740 and 725 BCE. And the most ancient extant copy of this prophecy that I'm going to share with you dates to 250 BCE. But it's not the only extant proof of the interactions of Israel in the land. You see, there were two rather extraordinary steals that date to this particular time. One of them happens to be where the Israelites that were in the northern kingdom are seen being hauled away into Assyria, where the king of Assyria, specifically, and in the stele that was found in Assyria, say that he captured them, and he talked about him hauling them into slavery. But here's another one that's really interesting. This stele was discovered in Moab, which would be today's Jordan. It is it's called the Mishha stele. It is written in the second oldest form of the Hebrew alphabet. It's not written by Hebrews, however. It's written by the king of Moab. It's written by an enemy of Israel. And it's it goes on and on about the history. In fact, the history that it tells happens to be the exact history that is presented in Kings and in Chronicles about what occurred during this time. Now, this is a stone reference written by one of Israel's enemies in the 9th century BCE. Universally accepted as being authentic. And its inscriptions, written in Paleo-Hebrew using the Moabite language in the 9th century, not only parallels the story that is reported in the book of Kings, it refers to the kingdom of Israel. Names them. It being in Israel, it refers to the kingdom of Yahowah, which was separated from Israel at that time. There was a divided kingdom. And it refers to both the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Yahowah. It refers to the house of Omri and to the house of Dod, who's David, as well as specifically says that the God of Israel was Yahowah, presenting his name in writing in the stone dating to the 9th century. There is absolutely no way to claim rationally that Israel wasn't the homeland of Yehudim. It's impossible. And so what the Arab League is doing is to say that the truth is counterproductive to their interests. That what we need is the lie. And the idea there is that if we claim that there's people called Palestinians, which there aren't, and we'll speak of that in a moment, and there's a place called Palestine, that lie, if accepted, puts us in a superior position in terms of defeating these Jews and taking their homeland from them. And if you, as part of the United Nations, tell the truth, if you reveal the history here, you're going to undermine our goals. Now, when people make such a claim, rather than the United Nations capitulating and saying, you know, we're going to ignore what our own scientific and cultural researchers have found, but we're going to pull it because you have these enraged individuals that say that this truth is contrary to their goals, at some point you need to bow your back and say to hell with them. You know, we need to promote this because it exposes an extraordinarily important lie. And the lie is that prior to Israel fighting with Moab, which is the stories that is depicted in this steel, in this stone. They were fighting with the Philistines in what is today's Gaza. And in that battle, the Philistines were initially successful over the Israelites. But ultimately, the Israelites fought them to what was essentially a truce, a tie. They remained bitter enemies. But the Assyrians came in, and when they wiped out the northern kingdom of Israel, they wiped out the Philistines. They killed them all. There was no surviving Philistine. They were a very warlike group. They decided that they could fight the Assyrians. Their backs were up against the sea. The Assyrians slaughtered them. There's no surviving Philistine. Now, the Romans in 135, after the Rabbi Akiba rebellion where he promoted a false Messiah, Bar Kokhba, son of a star, he lost to the Romans. The Romans brought in 3 legions, and they beat back Israel and in the province of Yahowah. And they were so tired of the fact that it was only Israel, Yahowah, amongst all of the countries that they had conquered and had savaged and had taxed and had abused and had controlled, that was willing to war against their tyranny, because they had done it twice. The Romans decided they would salt the land. They would haul the Jews off to slavery. When they destroyed the temple, they took its loot and used that to fund the Colosseum in Rome. And the Israelite slaves were used as the labor to build the Colosseum in Rome. And so from the most important site in the world to the most corrupt site in the world, this direct transition. Well, at that time, the Romans decided, the great enemy of the Israelites was the Philistines. So we'll rename the province of Yahowah, Judah, Philistia. And that's how the myth of a land of Palestine began. We're going to shatter that myth. We'll be back in a moment. So everyone, whether it be the U.S. military, U.S. government, politicians, or the media, and this would be true throughout the world, has adhered to and has promoted the myth that there is such thing as a Palestinian people, and that there's a place called Palestine, and that they are entitled to their homeland, and that the dastardly Jews have gone in there and they have stolen the homeland from the Palestinians, and they have occupied it. And that they've done so in a manner that is in conflict with international law. It's all a bunch of rubbish. It's a bunch of lies. And that's what the Arab League doesn't want anyone to know. The truth is, there is no such thing as the Palestinian people. None. Not a single one. They're just Arab Muslims. There is no such thing as a Palestinian. The last Palestinian was killed way over 2,500 years ago. There is no place called Palestine. Even during the time of the Philistines, Philistia was nothing but a enclave, 5 cities around Gaza. And its ancient history. That'd be like saying the Greeks ought to give up Sparta because, sometime in history, going back in ancient history, it was part of Sparta. That's like saying that the Lebanese don't have rights to their country because at one time there was a people called the Phoenicians. We should give Crete back to the inhabitants who were all swallowed up in a tidal wave following the great eruption on Santorini. that the Egyptians have no right to that country because it belongs to the pharaohs. I mean, it's absurd. The Philistines were wiped out long, long ago, and they were wiped out not by the Jews. Jews couldn't beat them. They were wiped out by the Assyrians, today's Iran and Iraq. The very people that want them to, the mythical people, to prevail. But if there's this myth that there's such thing as a Palestinian people and that there's a place called Palestine, then you'll believe the myth that the Jewish people are occupying their land. Now, the reality is that when these mythical people called the Palestinians, they're just nothing but Arab Muslims, were living within Israel after they had failed 3 times to eradicate them. They tried first in the War of Independence, the Civil War. It's called the Arab-Israeli War, and it wasn't. It was Islam against the Jews. And then you have the 6-Day War and the Yom Kippurim War, where Muslims in unison tried to destroy Israel, wiping the Jews out to the last. That after those wars, still, at that point, the Muslims, even though they turned against the Jews, living in Israel, were the freest, the healthiest, the richest Muslims in the world. And that was the problem. You see, it was a black eye for Islam. Here are Muslims that are living hellish existence every place except when they're living inside of Israel. And there, they're prosperous. There, they're well-educated. There, they're free. There, they're healthy because they have access to Israeli medical care. Every place else, living under Islamic societies, they're impoverished. They have no freedom. Living in hellish conditions. And so Muslims couldn't tolerate that. Made them and their God and their religion look inept. So they decided that rather than benefit, they would turn the Arabs living in Israel who were citizens against the Jews. And Yasser Arafat and the PLO were the sharp end of the prod, and they began to murder, terrorize Jews. And so the world decided, let's reward the terrorists. Let's reward terror. The way we can bring peace to the world is to force Israel, who has too little land, to give the Muslims their land, even though the Muslims have too much land. And that what the Jews will get back instead is promises of peace when the Muslims have never known peace. They've brought nothing but terror and harassment. They are who they are. You want to know who they are? Witness what they're doing in Iraq. Witness what they're doing in Syria. Witness what they're doing in Egypt. They are who they are. Witness what they're doing in Gaza. And so those people, they want to reward with land carved out of Israel. United Nations exhibit called People Book Land, the 3,500-year relationship of the Jewish people and the land of Israel, which was jointly created by the Jewish Human Rights Group, the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, was canceled because of a complaint from the Arab League that it could create potential obstacles related to the peace process in the Middle East. After invitations had gone out, and the fully prepared exhibition material was already in place. The display was co-sponsored by Israel, Canada, and Montenegro. Rabbi Marvin Heer of the Wiesenthal Center called the move an absolute outrage. Quote, the Arabs, and he didn't say Muslims should have, don't want the world to know the Jews have a 3,500-year relationship with the land of Israel. In a letter to Bakova, president of UNESCO, Abdullah al-Nimini from the United Arab Emirates expressed deep worry and great disapproval over the program showing the age-old connection between Israel and the Jewish people. You see, when truth confronts lies, lies fail. And so what do liars do? They try to control people's access to the truth. That's what liars do. Now, why would the world want to side with the liars? You know, why does, I happen to enjoy sports, golf's one of my favorite sports, why does a Phil Mickelson go over and play in Abu Dhabi? Why does the Formula One circuit go there? Just because they're fiefdoms that float on oil and they have lots of money. Why do that? When you know how egregious they are in terms of their animosity to what's true. And, you know, there are different kinds of lies. There's lies when your wife asks you, does this dress make me look fat? And you say, absolutely not, sweetheart. I can say this because my wife is extraordinarily petite. So I'm not going to get in trouble for this. But that's a common lie that does no one any harm. And you say, no, absolutely not. You look beautiful, as always. But when you're dealing with a people's heritage and the fact that the world keeping them out of their land is what led to the Holocaust, and that this animosity for the Jewish people that has been fanned because of the Quran's grotesque anti-Semitism. And you look at the terror that is perpetrated in the world based upon these lies. These are not ordinary lies, just in terms of the carnage that takes place in the world based upon these lies. Based upon the advocates of these lies embracing terrorism to get their way. Based upon the fact that the only credible witness for God that exists in the universe is the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, where Yahowah, the only credible candidate for God, in fact, who proves that he's God, proves that he inspired the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, says, these are my chosen people, and I have given this land to them, and he created the universe. And yet this lie goes against him. This is not your average lie. This is the lie that's going to create World War III, the Magog War. It's the lie that's going to lead to the deaths to half of the world's population. This is not an average lie. And yet it is being universally promoted by Muslims, and they don't want you to know the truth. When someone tries to tell the truth, that there is a 3,500 to 4,000 year history of Yehudim, of Yisrael, in the land of Yisrael, and that there is no history of Muslims in the land other than to savage it, other than to conquer it, ever so briefly. They're deadly afraid that you would no longer be among those who promote the myth of a Palestinian state and a Palestinian people, as does the Obama administration, as did the Bush administration prior to it. The Iraq Study Group, trying to resolve the fact that Iraq was a losing proposition, that we made a bad situation worse in Iraq, said the way to resolve this is to give the Muslims Israel. To thin Israel at the waist, give them Gaza and the West Bank. Not recognizing that doing so will be identical to Adolf Hitler receiving from Neville Chamberlain the high ground of Czechoslovakia, which led directly to World War II. But this is what's going to lead to World War III. And Yahowah said as much. And so what I'd like to do is to share with you a very interesting prophecy regarding this mess that is being waged in Damascus, which is the catalyst and the throttle for the next world war, and how that leads directly to Israel being thinned at the waist, with Israel being forced by the United States and other nations based upon this lie of the Palestinian people, based upon this lie of this myth of Palestine, and how that is going to lead not only to the destruction of those nations that offer this as the solution to Islamic rage, siding with the terrorist in this case, rewarding the terrorists, but how it's going to lead to World War III. It is a fascinating story. It's a story that you could never appreciate until you witnessed Muslims killing Muslims in the Shia-Sunni civil war that is a proxy war that has half of the world on one side and half the world on the other in Damascus, and how it is the very match that is going to ignite all of this. Yahowah in Yashayah, that means salvation is from Yah. It's been corrupted to Isaiah. In the 17th chapter, the first verse begins with the following: a prophetic pronouncement regarding Damascus. Behold, Damascus is revolting and corrupt, and it will be removed from inhabited cities, and she shall totally and actually become a twisted and tangled heap of rubble. Now think about that. Damascus is the longest continuously inhabited city in the world. And here's a prediction that was consummated in writing around 740 BCE, 2,700 years ago. And Yahowah is speaking in first person here. And he's saying that Damascus is the center of something that is occurring in the world that is going to lead to world war, that it's going to be destroyed. And this city is going to become a twisted heap of rubble. It's going to be removed from among inhabited cities. Now, Damascus was the center of Islamic world domination for many centuries. You know, after Muhammad pillaged every Jewish community and his own hometown, during the first 10 years of the Islamic era, leading 75 terrorist raids, murdering every Jewish man, enslaving every Jewish child, raping every Jewish woman within camel ride of Mecca and Yathrib, today's Medina. In the aftermath of his death, there was two fighting factions, which have now become known as Sunnis and Shias, that fought for control of the barbarian mechanism of terror for plunder that Muhammad had created. And initially, the Shias prevailed, and they had as their capital the area that they had conquered in Persia. The Persians were very much weakened by wars with the Byzantines, and they conquered the Persians, and they moved their capital not into Mecca, not to Medina, but to the areas outside of Baghdad. And that was the golden era of Islam, because they were so successful in the next 100 years as barbarians, plundering the world all the way from Spain to India, throughout northern Africa, including savaging what was the Byzantine hold on Israel. Well, then there's a battle between the two warring factions of Islam, between what is known today as the Sunnis and the Shias, with the Shias claiming that the control of Islam ought not go to the Meccans, who had provided the money and the arms for Islam to prevail, but instead to Muhammad's grandson, Ali. And Ali was killed, meaning that it was over for the Shiites in terms of their dominion over Islam, and so the Sunnis prevailed, and they moved their capital from the Shiite-dominated areas around today's Iran and Iraq to Damascus, this very city that Yah was saying is going to fall, going to become a twisted heap of ruins. And it now is this Sunni capital of the world, Damascus, that Yahowah is saying now 1,500 years before Islam was even created, is going to be the eye of the storm that it's going to be destroyed. Now, if you would look up, just Google war damage in Damascus, and look at the pictures, what you will see is nothing but a twisted heap of rubble. And it's going to get worse. That's what God predicted is exactly what is happening. And it's happening in Damascus. And Damascus now, because it's a proxy war between Sunni and Shia Muslims, and it's being fought because of America's invasion of Iraq and giving Iraq to Iran, empowering the Shiites over the Sunnis, with American weapons being wielded on both sides. And now with China and Russia on one side because their allegiances with Iran and oil in the Caspian Sea, and the United States and Europe on the other because of their dependence upon Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, particularly Qatar. Now you see the catalyst for World War III, right before our faces, and Yahowah directs our attention there. But he wasn't done. There was a lot more than saying that this was a prophetic pronouncement against Damascus, and that Damascus is corrupt, that it's revolting, and that it will no longer be inhabited and will become a twisted heap of tangled rubble. There's more that God had to say, and we'll consider it in a moment. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. We're considering a prophetic pronouncement from Yahowah. The Hebrew word is masa, means a prophecy attributed to God here. Damascus is from Damesk in Hebrew, the capital of Syria. It was an area successfully controlled by Israel, Assyria, Babylon, Greece, Rome, the Byzantine Empire, the first Muslims, then the Ottomans. It is currently the center of world upheaval. It is from the word drama, which means a weeping sore, dema, which means tears and sorrow, domen, which means corpses covered in dung, and daman, which means to grow dumb and to be silenced. Yahowah uses the word behold. It's henna. Henna is the one of the more interesting Hebrew words. It's based upon the Hebrew hay. It speaks of, it was drawn showing two people standing, reaching up, looking up to God. It's the two letters that are repeated in Yahowah's name, showing two people standing, reaching up and looking up to him. It means pay attention. He says Damascus is revolting and corrupt and will be removed from among inhabited cities. This is Sur Men Ir. It is degenerate and unrestrained, and thus shall be rejected and abolished as a population center, enduring anguish and terror. It was written in the hopeful stem, which means this fate was foisted upon Damascus, and as a participle, meaning Damascus will come to embody unrestrained corruption. It will become what they are. They will suffer this fate because they are this very thing. And if you look at the two warring sides here, you've got reprehensible and disgusting. Assad is absolutely reprehensible. Those fighting him are even more revolting. And so it is an apt depiction, revolting and corrupt. It doesn't matter which side you're looking at, whether it's the Assad government and the Shiites that back him, or the Sunni jihadists that are in opposition to the Shia government. It is revolting, it is corrupt, it is degenerate, it is unrestrained. God's depiction of it is Sur Men Ir, is precisely accurate. And she shall totally and actually become Haya. Haya is the basis of Yahowah's name. It means to be. And because Hebrew is written such that it's not stuck in time, you translate Hebrew in the future tense when it is a prophecy, because God has introduced this as something that's going to happen in the future when he wrote this and spoke it through his prophet. This is God speaking in first person. In around 740 BCE, so 2,720 years ago, is when he conveyed this, and she shall become a twisted and tangled, this is from ma'i, a distorted, crooked, perverted, and contorted heap of rubble, mafala, which means destroyed ruin, from nafal, that which falls prostrate, that which is overthrown as inferior. Yahowah's attitude towards the display of Islamic terrorism he is witnessing in Damascus is hardly sympathetic. Sur, which was translated revolting and corrupt and will be removed, can be rendered turned away and abolished, degenerate and forsaken, even rejected as being wild and unrestrained. Similarly, conveys more than just inhabited city. It also speaks of anguish, anxiety, wrath, anger, and terror. Another insight worth considering is the juxtaposition of ma'i and mafala, which collectively depict the nature of the Muslim terrorists currently reducing Damascus to a heap of ruins. They're twisted, they are distorted, they are corrupt, and they are perverted people subject to prostration, which is the signature move, of course, of Islam. And inexcusably, these jihadists are wielding American weapons, staining the American consciousness with the murder of over 100,000 souls. Worse, the United States is making Israel more vulnerable to the onslaught of Islam as a result, and ultimately will seek to stop the carnage by giving both sides what they crave most, which is Israel. And that is where this is leading by the time we get to the 4th verse of the 17th chapter of Isaiah. But we're going to return, and we're going to consider what we can learn from the 1st and 2nd verses of Yashayah. Salvation is from Yahowah 17. When Shattering Myths continues after the news and commercial break. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.